if in fact that actually does even take place. Because the question becomes, like, what is the future if time travel does exist?
John Titor, known online as Time Travel Zero, often talked about how people care more about their own comfort than big world issues. Despite sharing his thoughts about future technologies like solar energy on forums, many thought he just wanted attention. If Titor has returned after vanishing for years, what urgent, dark secrets might he now reveal? As we dive into this story, brace yourself. What's coming will challenge everything you thought you knew, and John Titor's sudden reappearance is just the beginning of the surprises in store. Back to premium basics. In January 2001, Titor started sharing more of his thoughts on the Art Bell BBS forum. Even though he gave warnings about the future and shared ideas about new technologies, most people didn't take him seriously and thought he was just looking for attention. Over the years, some of his predictions, like the rise of solar energy and hydrogen fuel cells, have come true, which makes his claims a bit more believable. But what if the most startling parts of his predictions are yet to unfold, secrets so profound they could reshape our understanding of reality? Stay tuned as we uncover the truths that John Titor hesitated to reveal. Titor also predicted that the internet would continue to grow and stay strong, even though some thought it might collapse. His prediction about the shift in the entertainment industry, where more people would create and share their own content, turned out to be very accurate. These predictions, made over 20 years ago, show that he had a good understanding of where technology and culture were heading. Despite some of his predictions coming true, many people on the forum didn't believe Titor back then. This mix of doubt and later validation shows how complicated his story really was. He was someone who seemed to know a lot about the future, but struggled to convince people at the time. Now, looking back at what he said and seeing how much has changed, it might be worth rethinking what he tried to tell us and what it means for where our world is headed. John Titor's journey through time didn't just start in the year 2000. It actually took him back to 1975, to Rochester, Minnesota. His mission there was to retrieve the IBM 5100, one of the first portable computers. But this wasn't just any old piece of technology. This machine was critical for something specific in the year 2036. Titor's mission was personal. His grandfather had helped design the IBM 5100. He needed this old computer for a future filled with advanced tech, because it could handle old systems vital for the government in 2036, using its unique features to work with modern Unix systems, features not documented officially. An IBM engineer later confirmed these unique capabilities, proving the computer's importance for the future. Although Titor's stop in 2000 seemed brief, it allowed him to retrieve the IBM 5100 from 1975. This pause let him share crucial information and prepare for future tasks, leaving lingering questions about the connections between technology, history, and the future. John Titor's car was no ordinary vehicle. It was a time-traveling machine equipped with a device to bend time and manipulate gravity, allowing seamless travel through the years. He housed this technology in a classic 1966 Chevrolet Corvette, blending futuristic technology with a vintage look to keep it disguised. Titor's stop in the year 2000 was intentional. He wanted to observe the Y2K bug's effects firsthand. In the late 90s, there was widespread fear that the millennium change could cause computer failures and chaos. Driven by a deep interest in significant technological events, Titor chose to experience this moment directly to better understand pivotal historical events. Titor also used this stop in 2000 to reconnect with his past in a personal way. He planned to visit his family and even meet his younger self. This kind of personal interaction was something special for him, and he considered it far more exciting than anything virtual. It also showed how tricky time travel can be, where personal experiences and big historical events are all mixed together. One thing that made Titor stand out from other people claiming to be time travelers was how open he was about his journey. He didn't just talk about his time machine, he showed pictures and even shared how it worked. He also claimed to have helped prevent the Y2K bug from becoming a real crisis, proving he wasn't just an observer, but someone willing to step in and make changes when needed. This showed he wasn't only exploring time for himself, but he was also trying to help out when he could. The one, Chevrolet Corvette. The car he traveled in, a modified Chevrolet Corvette, became a symbol of his journey. It was a perfect mix of old-school style and future tech. The car itself, with its time-traveling capabilities, added another layer of mystery to Titor's travels, blending everyday things with the extraordinary and leaving people who followed his story intrigued. Inside John Titor's time machine, the cabin had to be completely sealed off from the outside air during the journey. This was important because the machine created its own airtight environment to keep Titor safe and provide life support while traveling through time. According to Titor, traveling through time was both strange and exciting. As the machine started up, the world around it would begin to blur and stretch, which was caused by the strong gravitational fields bending the light. This strange visual effect was a sign that the time machine was working, marking the start of the journey through different points in time. Once the machine was running, it relied on very precise technology to keep everything stable during the trip. One of the key parts of the machine was the cesium clock, which was needed to make sure Titor ended up in the right time period. The machine also had gravity sensors and something called a variable gravity lock, VGL, which adjusted the gravity inside so that it remained safe for Titor during the time jump. Titor didn't just talk about how his time machine worked. He shared enough details to get people really curious about the science behind it. His willingness to explain the machine and its features sparked a lot of interest online. People who were excited about science and technology started talking about whether it would be possible to build something like it in real life. Eventually, Titor had to move the components of his time machine from his Chevrolet Corvette to a sturdier four-wheel drive truck. This change made people think that he might be preparing for tougher or longer trips through time. When he sold the Corvette, it added even more mystery, as people online began trying to track down the car and figure out who bought it. John Titor's story gave people a detailed and exciting look into what time travel might actually be like. His journey, and the way he shared it, kept people talking and wondering if time travel could really become a part of our future, blurring the line between science fiction and real-life possibilities. By the time John Titor came to visit, the balance of power in Asia had changed a lot. Countries that were once considered small players on the global stage had become powerful and influential. This shift in global dynamics was one of the many surprising things Titor shared about the future. Titor explained that his time machine could move through time at an incredible speed, traveling 10 years in just 1 hour. However, this amazing speed wasn't without its flaws. The machine had an accuracy range of about 60 years, meaning he could aim for a specific era, but the exact year might be off by a bit. Even with this limitation, Titor seemed hopeful that future engineers would improve the technology to make it more precise. The idea behind Titor's time travel was based on the many worlds theory from quantum mechanics, which was developed by Hugh Everett and John Wheeler. This theory suggests that every possible outcome happens at the same time in different parallel worlds. Every choice creates a new branch of the universe. For Titor, this meant that each time he traveled, he would end up in a slightly different version of the universe. This approach helped avoid the usual problems with time travel, like accidentally changing the past in dangerous ways. Despite the idea that he would land in an alternate universe, Titor decided to meet his younger self during his visit to the year 2000. Normally, time travelers in stories are warned not to change events because it could lead to disaster. Titor's choice to meet his younger self showed a different attitude toward time travel, one that embraced the risks and uncertainties of interacting with alternate versions of reality. During his time in the year 2000, Titor wasn't just focused on retrieving the IBM computer he needed for his mission. He also made a number of big statements about future events. These weren't just predictions, they were based on his experiences in the future. To the people in the early 2000s, His words sounded almost prophetic, especially when he talked about the future power shifts in Asia. Titor's journey through time and the things he shared left many questioning if his claims were real and what they might mean for the present and the future. His story pushed the limits of what people thought was possible and opened up new conversations about whether time travel could truly change history or shape the future. John Titor shared a troubling vision of the future of the United States. According to him, the U.S. will face serious instability and major changes due to a global nuclear war. This war won't just affect populations, but will also shake up global power, with traditional strong countries either losing influence or needing to adjust to a completely new world order. Titor's predictions paint a bleak picture where old alliances fall apart and new ones form out of necessity for survival. Countries like South Korea, he says, will rise to become superpowers, while others, like Japan, will experience a severe decline both economically and socially. It's a future where global relationships will look very different. Titor talked about a world of stark contrasts, where some nations rise quickly while others fall behind. He predicted that South Korea would become very powerful, even taking control of parts of China, Vietnam, and Japan, changing the balance of power in Asia and beyond. Titor also warned about the future of governments, especially in places like Japan. He claimed that Japan would become a lawless country with crime everywhere and a government that can't keep things under control. This serves as a strong warning that countries need to be prepared for big changes. These warnings echo advice from investors like Jim Rogers, who urges immediate action to manage future risks. A devastating global power shift. These predictions aren't just coming from Titor. Other sources like Goldman Sachs have also suggested that South Korea could become a major global power in the future. This gives some weight to the idea that big changes in global power may be on the way. These kinds of discussions are making people think more seriously about how prepared we are for major global events and what nations can do to stay strong. As John Titor shares his visions of the future, his tales grab the attention of those concerned about global security and stability. His messages, seen either as warnings or intriguing ideas, prompt thoughts on the world's future path and the impact of upcoming technological and political shifts. Titor's dark view of the future includes major upheavals, depicting the United States in 2036 as a nation divided into states with their own rules, following a civil war. This fragmentation wasn't limited to the U.S. Similar splits occurred worldwide due to conflicts and societal collapses. Titor's narratives serve not just as warnings, but as cautionary tales urging action on current issues to avoid future crises. He links today's decisions in technology, international relations, and health to potential future troubles, highlighting how technological advances, such as those at CERN enabling time travel, also introduce new challenges for governments and societies. According to Titor, the division within the U.S. was just the beginning of even bigger global struggles. The conflicts and splits in the U.S. showed what could happen around the world if we let political and social divisions grow. His description of events leading up to and after the Civil War painted a scary picture of what might happen if these problems aren't fixed. Titor also talked about specific health and technology crises. He mentioned issues like mad cow disease and the debate over genetically modified foods. These problems, he said, were connected to the overall health of society. And what's even more surprising is that some of these things actually happened in the real world after he talked about them, which made people take his other predictions a bit more seriously. Titor depicted a 2036 world with advanced technology like time travel, but also grappling with ethical, social, and health challenges, illustrating that progress brings both benefits and responsibilities. His stories prompted deep reflections on the potential future consequences of our present choices. By 2036, society had to adapt significantly to survive, shifting to sustainable energy sources like electric cars and biofuels due to the scarcity of fossil fuels. This necessity transformed transportation, industries, and daily lifestyles, forcing communities to adopt simpler, eco-friendly living practices. Titor's description of 2036 shows a world where technology is closely tied to survival. Solar and wind energy have become the main sources of power, marking a big move away from using non-renewable resources. This isn't just about new technology, it's a shift in how people think about their environment and their responsibility to protect it. Titor also talked about how people started living in smaller, community-focused groups. Farming and growing food locally became important again, and economies became more focused on what people could produce within their own areas. In 2036, technology is used mainly to meet basic needs and improve everyday life, unlike before, when it was often about luxury or excess. People grow their own food, use local materials, and work together to get by, showing a strong return to simpler, community-based living. What's interesting is how Titor described mixing old and new technologies. He talked about using ancient farming methods alongside modern tools, creating a balance between past and present knowledge. This idea of blending the old with the new is about finding a way to live sustainably without losing the benefits of modern advancements. Transportation changed a lot too, with most vehicles running on electricity or biofuels. This shift wasn't just about being eco-friendly. It was something people had to do because of the lack of resources and the damage done to the environment. Societies had to completely rethink how they moved around and design transportation systems that were much kinder to the planet. Titor's vision of 2036 shows a world that faced big challenges but adapted in smart, meaningful ways. It's a world where technology is used to solve real problems and keep communities alive and well. His story offers a warning about the future, but also gives ideas for how we can handle the environmental, technological, and social challenges ahead. The strange story of Rudolf Fens is a fascinating example of the mysteries surrounding time travel. It ties in with the broader story of John Titor and his predictions, adding an interesting layer to the discussion about time and the unknown. Fens's sudden appearance in a completely different time, with only items from his own era, feels like something straight out of a science fiction novel, yet it was a real event that left people puzzled. Fens's experience, much like Titor's, shows just how unpredictable time travel can be. While Titor talked about a future changed by environmental problems and new technology, Fens's story feels like a reflection of the past, suddenly appearing in the present. It reminds us of how much things have changed over time, but also how many things remain unexplained. Fens's sudden shift from 19th century New York to a modern city underscores dramatic changes in technology, buildings, and societal norms over a century. His outdated attire and confusion, along with the public's reaction, highlight the profound changes time can bring and raise questions about the nature of time and possible time-related anomalies. The mystery deepens with the items Fens carried, like coins and a letter from his era, which served as verifiable connections to the past, but were out of place in the present. Further complicating matters was Mrs. Rudolph Fens Jr. Watt's testimony, which confounded the police and left them grappling with evidence that contradicted known reality, resulting in more questions than answers. Some people have suggested that Fens's sudden appearance could be explained by things like time rifts, aliens, or other unusual theories. These ideas echo what Titor shared about the challenges of time travel. Both stories, while coming from different sources, highlight the big mystery of time travel and how it could impact our understanding of the world and our place in it. But this wasn't just about a strange event. It also made people think about the possibilities beyond what we know today. The stories of John Titor and Rudolf Fens invite us to consider what time travel could mean, not just as a cool scientific breakthrough, but as something that could change the way we see history, reality, and ourselves. Whether you see these stories as curious, cautionary, or simply fiction, they push the conversation forward about one of our greatest fascinations, the mystery of time.
Time travel and his story. Let's start at the beginning, November 2000. The internet was still finding its footing, but forums were already bustling hubs of discussion, debate, And yes, a fair share of oddities. It was on one such forum called the Time Travel Institute that someone with the username timetravel_0 made their debut. At first glance, it seemed like just another strange online presence. But then this person dropped a bombshell. He claimed to be a time traveler from the year 2036. Naturally, the room went silent, or at least as silent as an online forum could get. Curiosity piqued, keyboards started clicking, and questions poured in. Who was this person? What were they saying? And most importantly, was any of it true? The man behind the username introduced himself as John Titor. He described himself as a soldier stationed in Florida in 2036, sent on a mission to retrieve a very specific piece of technology, the IBM 5100, a portable computer from the 1970s. Why such an ancient relic, you ask? John explained that this computer had a unique ability to fix a serious software issue of his time, a problem that could wreak havoc on crucial systems. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. John didn't just make vague claims and call it a day. He provided intricate details about his time machine. Yes, a time machine. According to him, this device was not some shiny, futuristic contraption. It was housed in a car, and not just any car. He mentioned two. Initially, a 1966 or 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, and later a 1987 four-wheel drive truck. John gave a full breakdown of his time machine, calling it the C204 Gravity Distortion Unit. This was not just a catchy name. He described it as a piece of cutting-edge technology created by General Electric. The way he laid it out, the machine had 6 key components that made time travel possible. There were magnetic housing units to hold miniature black holes. Yes, black holes. Then there was something called an electron injection manifold, which helped control the mass and gravity of these black holes. A cooling and venting system kept the whole thing from overheating, while gravity sensors made sure they didn't, crash into a random point in space-time. Finally, it relied on super accurate clocks and computer units to make sure everything worked like a charm. To anyone on the forum, this was more than just some guy rambling about time travel. His explanations were so detailed and technical that even skeptics had to pause and think, what if he was telling the truth? And then there was the IBM 5100. Let's take a step back and talk about this computer. In the 1970s, it was revolutionary, one of the first portable computers. But in John's version of events, it was not just another piece of tech history. He claimed the IBM 5100 had a hidden feature, known only to a select few engineers at the time. This feature allowed it to emulate older programming languages like APL and BASIC, which according to John was critical for debugging legacy systems in his future. The shocking part is that this was not common knowledge back in 2000. Only a handful of people would have even known about this feature, mostly engineers who worked on the IBM 5100 in the 1970s. And John claimed that one of those engineers was none other than his own grandfather. That's right. According to him, his paternal grandfather had been part of the IBM team that designed the 5100. So in a way, this mission was personal for John. His family connection was supposedly the reason he was chosen for the task. Naturally, people on the forum had questions. Lots of them. What did his time machine look like? How did it work? Why was the IBM 5100 so important? And while many of these questions came from genuine curiosity and a healthy dose of skepticism. After all, how often does someone show up online claiming to be a time traveler? Well, not very often. John didn't shy away from the spotlight, though. He stuck around, answering questions with patience and, dare I say, a hint of smugness. He seemed to know his stuff. When people pressed him about the science behind his claims, he dropped explanations that sounded way too complex for an amateur. The way he talked about black holes, gravity, and computer programming left some people wondering if this guy might actually be the real deal. But not everyone was convinced. Some accused him of being a prankster or a science fiction enthusiast with a lot of free time. Others thought he might have an insider's knowledge of IBM or physics, but was spinning a tale for attention. Either way, John Titor became a topic of heated debate. One of the most compelling parts of John's story was his knowledge of the IBM 5100's hidden capabilities. Remember, this was not something you could just Google back in 2000. The fact that he brought it up made even skeptics pause. If he was lying, how did he know about this obscure feature? Did he have a background in computer science? Was he really connected to someone who worked on the IBM 5100? Or, as his supporters claimed, was he genuinely from the future? Despite all the back and forth, one thing was clear: that John had an audience. His post drew in both believers and doubters, and he handled them with a calm, measured tone. It was not long before John became an internet sensation. People dissected his posts, analyzed his claims, and tried to poke holes in his story. Some even speculated about who he might really be. Then he started predicting strange events for the future. So what did he predict that actually came true afterward, the strange predictions? First, John shared his thoughts on what was to come. He introduced the concept of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This idea suggests that every time a decision is made or an event happens, the universe splits into parallel versions to accommodate every possible outcome. According to John, the events he described may have happened in his timeline, but not necessarily in ours. Now, wasn't this a little bit convenient? That gave him a lot of wiggle room when his predictions didn't come true. Now let's get to the good stuff, his actual predictions. One of John's most talked about predictions was a second American Civil War. Titor said that the Civil War would start in 2005 due to political unrest around a presidential election. According to him, the conflict would escalate, splitting the U.S. into 5 regions. And that wasn't all. He claimed that this civil war would eventually lead to a brief but devastating global nuclear war in 2015. Millions would die, and America's capital would move to Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, Omaha, not exactly where you would picture the heart of the nation, but, well, it was John's timeline. That's what he said. Of course, none of this actually happened, at least not in our world. But that didn't stop believers from dissecting his posts and drawing parallels to real-world events. People wondered if he got the dates wrong or if our decisions somehow changed the course of history. Either way, the Civil War story became a hallmark of his predictions. John didn't stop with wars. He also talked about a health scare. He claimed that a human form of mad cow disease, also known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, would become more common. His warning was to be careful with what you eat. Now, while this disease didn't become the epidemic he predicted, it did make headlines in the early 2000s. Whether he was just riding the wave of existing concerns or genuinely knew something, we will never know. Another bold claim was that the Olympic Games would be canceled indefinitely after 2004. This one is easy to debunk because, as we know, the Olympics have marched on, though not without a hiccup or two. Still, it is interesting to note that John tied this prediction to the supposed civil unrest and global instability he foresaw. Without that chaos, the games continued as usual. After this, John claimed that time travel technology was discovered at CERN in Switzerland. According to him, this breakthrough happened sometime around 2001, laying the foundation for the time machine he used. While CERN is known for advanced research, including work with particle accelerators and black holes, no one has come forward with a time machine yet. But if CERN scientists are holding out on us, maybe John was onto something. Now here's the thing, while most of John's predictions didn't come true, they started endless debates. Some people argued that his accuracy didn't matter because of the many worlds interpretation. If there are infinite timelines, who is to say these events didn't happen in one of them? Others called it all a clever hoax, pointing out how his predictions often aligned with existing fears and trends of the early 2000s. For example, the Civil War prediction tapped into political divisions that were already brewing in the U.S. at the time. The mad cow disease warning played on real health concerns. Even his talk about decentralized communities and local farming reflected the growing interest in sustainable living. Was John really from the future, or just a guy who knew how to mold current events into a compelling story? Let's play devil's advocate for a moment. What if John's predictions were not entirely wrong, but just misinterpreted? Take the Civil War, for example. While we didn't see an all-out war, political tensions in the U.S. have certainly escalated over the years. Could he have been exaggerating a trend he observed in his timeline? Or maybe the parallel universes he talked about skewed the outcome. Then there is his talk about time travel at CERN. While no one has cracked the code for time machines yet, CERN has made incredible advancements in understanding the universe. Maybe these discoveries eventually lead to something like what John described. It is a stretch, but not entirely out of the realm of possibility. And then there was his Olympic prediction. While the Games were not canceled, the pandemic did force a delay in 2020, and some events were held without spectators. It is not exactly what he said, but it is not entirely off the mark either. Maybe this was another case of right idea, wrong details. Now, whether you believe John Titor was a genuine time traveler or just an imaginative storyteller, his predictions tell us something about ourselves. They reflect our fears, hopes, and curiosity about the future. They remind us of how easily we can be captivated by the unknown, even when it challenges our sense of reality. Even though his predictions never actually came true in full form, his explanation about time traveling and its mechanism shocked quite a lot of people. For someone who repeatedly insisted he was not a physicist, John sure had a lot to say about the process of jumping through time. When his machine was turned on, the experience was not like stepping into a flashy sci-fi portal or witnessing a burst of glowing light. Instead, everything went black. John compared it to waking up from a dream, darkness all around, slowly giving way to the world as the machine powered down. He also said that during the transition, passengers often fell asleep due to the high gravitational forces. Honestly, not a bad way to kill time when traveling through dimensions. John also mentioned some unique safety precautions. For example, passengers had to wear sunglasses or close their eyes during the journey because the machine emitted a brief burst of ultraviolet radiation. Now, whether this was a safety concern or just an excuse for futuristic fashion, we will never know. He also warned against leaving the windows open because the exterior of the vehicle got ridiculously hot during a jump. Another interesting detail was how the machine operated. John explained that time travel was not as simple as hitting a button and arriving at your destination. The machine relied on something he called the variable gravity lock, which scanned the environment before making a jump. This system ensured that the vehicle didn't materialize inside a wall, a cement block, or a person. The VGL compared gravitational signatures and adjusted the landing point accordingly. This meant planning a jump took time and precision, making it more like plotting a space mission than a spontaneous trip. Now let's address one of the forum's most frequently asked questions. Why couldn't they travel to just any point in history? John explained that the farther you move from the present timeline, the greater the divergence from your original world line. This divergence made it harder to predict what you would encounter. For example, if you went back 2,000 years hoping to meet someone famous, say Julius Caesar, you might end up in a world line where he never existed. John said that after about 60 years, the chances of landing in a completely unfamiliar version of history increased dramatically. In short, time travel was not an exact science. It came with risks, limitations, and so much unpredictability. One claim that always raised eyebrows was John's mention of seeing himself on other worldlings. He admitted to meeting another version of himself twice, once during a training mission and again during his visit to our timeline. He described the experience as surreal, but said it didn't cause any catastrophic paradoxes. In his words, every possible thing that can happen or will happen has already happened somewhere. So according to John, multiple versions of himself existed across different timelines, living out different possibilities. If that doesn't make your brain hurt, I don't know what will. Another fascinating aspect of his post was how he insisted time travelers didn't disrupt history. According to John, their influence was no greater than that of any ordinary person living in the past. They were not allowed to make significant changes, and they could not travel forward unless they had an invitation from the future. This claim gave his story a strange sense of responsibility, as though time travelers had a strict code of conduct they couldn't break. Now, when John made such strange claims, he was bound to be ridiculed. But John did not run away from them. He addressed his critics confidently. When people questioned his motives or accused him of being a fraud, he argued that society should be more concerned about its own flaws than whether or not he was telling the truth. He criticized modern culture for being lazy, self-centered, and oblivious to global suffering. He wrote, "Perhaps you should be less concerned about me and more concerned about that." Whether or not you believed his story, you had to admit he made a point. Over time, theories about John Titor multiplied, but then a strange thing happened. By March 2001, John stopped posting, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and an enduring mystery. But even after he vanished, the internet could not let go of his story. To this day, people are still talking about John Titor, debating his claims, and wondering if we will ever find out who or what he really was. So what's the most common theory about who John Titor really was? So who was John Titor? One of the more grounded theories points to Larry Haber, a Florida entertainment lawyer, and his brother Richard, a computer scientist. It is claimed that they created John as an elaborate hoax, combining technical knowledge and storytelling skills. But there is a catch here. No hard evidence links them directly to the posts, and neither has ever confirmed or denied their involvement. Both trademarked John Titor and registered it with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. This trademark is now classified as abandoned. Another theory suggests John Titor was an experiment in social psychology or online group dynamics. The detailed storylines and interactive format were tailor-made to spark debates and draw people into collaborative fiction. Maybe John was just a precursor to modern internet role-playing or viral campaigns. Maybe he was a creative writer testing the waters of audience engagement. Then there was the theory that John Titor was a marketing stunt for something that never took off. Some believe his posts were meant to drum up interest for a book, a game, or even a movie. But the project either flopped or was abandoned. This would explain the sudden disappearance of Titor and his lack of follow-up in later years. And of course, there is the group that refuses to let go of the possibility that John Titor was the real deal. A genuine time traveler who dropped into our timeline, warned us about our future, and vanished back into his own world. So who was he? A mastermind? A hoaxer? Or something else entirely? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more shocking stories. We will come back soon with a new one. Until then.